A few years ago, I happened to be connected with the son of a very well known motivational speaker, international motivational speaker. And one day, this son of this speaker goes on social media and start cussing his dad. He start calling names, and I'm like, what's happening? And then he starts telling us of how his dad has charged him of millions of dollars worth of business. And I'm like, what's happening here? And then his father goes on his platform and says, excuse me, my son is suffering from bipolar, so you should understand him, because everybody was like, oh, this is not happening. And that's when I came to uh, know about bipolar. I never knew about it before. Now, this is Now Tell Us, and I'm your host, Anthony Mwerore. Today, we have a guest who's been there and experienced it. He's dealt with bipolar and lived with it for his life up to now, almost all his life. He's going to tell us more about that because this is Now Tell Us. So we are going to invite our guest today, who is known as Steve Wilson. In a short while, he'll be here. And I remind you to please share this episode. If you have a question on bipolar, please ask. If you have a comment, we appreciate every feedback that you give us at Now Tell Us. And because you're here, that's why the episode is good. Even if you get to watch this after it's been recorded, we still appreciate your time. Remember to share, like, follow. Yeah, and let's keep it going. Let's have this conversation. So join me as we go together to meet our guest today, Steve Wilson. Here we go. Hello, Steve.
Hi, Anthony. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing real well, thanks.
Yeah, welcome to Now Tell Us.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to have you here. We appreciate you taking your time to come and tell us something. And this day is to do with bipolar. Now, before we get started, would like to know, where are you?
Like to know what?
Where are you?
Oh, Scottsdale, Arizona,
Okay, that's good.
in the U.S.
That's wonderful, wonderful. And you, excuse me, the viewer, the listener, if I get to shout, please understand Steve has got hearing aids, so sometimes he may not hear what I ask. He's been there, done that, experienced a lot of his life, and so you just in case you hear what, yeah, be patient because we are going to repeat what we just said. So thank you very much, Steve. Now, we see that you've lived on this face of the earth. How old are you, if I may ask?
What was
How,
that again?
how old are you?
74.
74. So Steve is 74. And you are here and you've lived your life to 74 and you had a bipolar. How was it? When was your condition discovered?
My condition was not determined and not diagnosed until 1971. But I had all kind of symptoms dating back to about fourth grade, 1958 or so. A traumatic incident happened to me when I was 9, and that's when it all kicked off. It, I didn't get therapy until 71. One of the reasons was I didn't have a clue what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Just sneaked up on me and knocked me down. I was one of the best students in school. I played a lot of sports, had a lot of friends, and then all of a sudden, I didn't care about anything. I was well, to put the truth, I didn't really know what a good reason for living was. I just
Mm-hmm.
watched TV. Uh, my grades went to hell. Um, just didn't want to do anything. Felt low, real low, and down and out.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but that with bipolar, you have what I guess you would call like a roller coaster ride. Uh, 1 week, 2 weeks, couple of months, you might be feeling pretty good, and then crash, you come down, and then you might be really bad for the next 2 months or whatever it is, and then the same episode continues on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have what's called bipolar 2, which is mostly depression,
Okay.
and then I hit into a thing called uh, a mania that is kind of in the middle. It's not the mania when you go out and buy cars and gamble and ruin your relationships. It's kind of like a medium high. It's called
Mm-hmm.
hypomania. In bipolar 1 is when you get the mania that is so bad that you'll just throw your life away.
Mm-hmm.
But we all have a cycle, and there are different medications to help the mania, and
Mm-hmm.
then different medications to help the depression. In 1972 or 71, when they first diagnosed me, they diagnosed me just with depression. Sadly, one day my psychiatrist came in and told me I was depressed, which, what the hell, I already knew. And he says, "Well, don't worry, you'll be over it in 4 weeks." Well, 50 years later, I've still got it, but I've managed to work with it and have a pretty good life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. So now you went through school with it and you
Yes.
cleared. How was it? What was the experience going to school with bipolar? Now, was it well those occurrences, these things happening on a daily basis, or like every year? Was there something happening? Something interesting, something that could maybe affect your schooling?
When let's see, the first depression came in fourth grade,
Mm-hmm.
and I really crashed and um, didn't want to do anything, wanted to sleep all the time. It was pretty bad. And it went away. And then in seventh grade, it came back. And eighth grade was pretty good. And then in ninth grade, I really felt bad. And the thing about it is, as I found out is true with a lot of other people who have bipolar, nobody knows because we hide it so well. My parents, even though they would see me sulking around the house, they didn't have a clue
Mm-hmm.
and really didn't understand what I was going through until I put myself in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
That was 1972 or so.
Mm-hmm. So, did you go to college? And what did you
Yes,
take?
I went to Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida.
Okay.
It was it's a private college. When I went, we had 1,200 students, and again, nobody had a clue what I was going through.
Mm-hmm.
That held all the way through college, and then I got out of college, tried to teach, Couldn't handle that. Tried to be a golf pro, not a playing pro, but a club pro. Couldn't handle that. In other words, I would go from job to job to job, but I couldn't stick any of them out. I would I would say that probably until I went back to my dad's clothing store and worked there, um, I had 6 or 7 jobs, each one of them lasting about 6 months. They were all good jobs, but couldn't handle it. So my family had a men's and women's clothing store in Ohio, and finally I just said, well, that's my only chance to work, and so I went back there and stayed there from about 1978 to 1995 when we closed it down.
Hmm. And from 1995 up to now, what have you been doing?
Well, I stayed in the clothing business, but I did it on my own. In other words, I sold custom tailored clothing to men and women around the state of Ohio
Hmm.
and got tired of that, went into real estate, failed at that, and finally got it under control with selling custom clothing. I went back to that after my short stint in real estate. And about 2004 or 5, I got a job. Probably my best job was the national sales manager for a custom clothing company out of Hong Kong. And
Hmm.
that lasted about 10 years. And then we moved out to Arizona and I went back to selling custom tailored clothing. What I found was that the only way I could really work well was if I was the boss and had to work by myself.
Hmm.
Because when I was on the road, I did it all alone. I just couldn't work for anybody, or I'd get so mad at the boss and I'd yell at him, and it was just bad.
Hmm.
So now
Now,
I'm retired. I retired about 4 years ago.
okay. And it's good that you've been through it and lived to come and tell us the story. Now, with these ups and downs, were there times in your life that you contemplated suicide or something like that?
The worst time in my life with bipolar was right after I came out of college and started working.
Mm,
Just to give you an example, um, I've been a swimmer all my life,
okay.
and I in when I was about 21 or 22, I went to our swimming pool to swim laps because I swam laps every day. This particular day, I think it was in June, I dived in the water, and all of a sudden, my mind said, kill yourself, all the way across the pool and back. And that scared me to death. I'd never had anything like that. And so I just quit swimming, got out of the pool, and that kind of stuff continued. Not not saying I'm going to kill myself, but it was like somebody else's voice was in my head saying, "Kill yourself."
Hmm.
And right after, well, in during that time, I was also having problems with my father, and there was another incident. And when I walked away from the incident with my father, I put myself in Harding Hospital. It is a psychiatric hospital in Columbus.
Hmm.
And that kind of got rid of the suicidal ideations.
Okay. Now that's from the medications that they gave you. You believe that they altered that, or the experience of going there?
Well, when I was diagnosed with depression,
Mm-hmm.
Now remember, this was back in the 70s. So what we have and you see advertised on TV all the time, there was none of that stuff. There
Yeah.
were about 3 or 4 medications, and if they didn't work, you were out of luck. So when I was diagnosed with depression, they tried several uh, antidepressants for me, and none of them worked.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them made me sick, be like the flu, but a really bad flu, and I couldn't tolerate them. Now, that was 1971 or 2.
Mm-hmm.
After all of these attempts to get some medication to work, in 1978, my psychiatrist came in to my appointment and said, "You know what? I think I might have made a mistake. I think you are bipolar." Bipolar didn't mean anything to me. I never heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, I didn't appreciate him making a mistake for 6 or 7 years. But anyway, he was right. It was bipolar. And that day, he put me on lithium. And about 2 days later, I was much better. Now, not good by comparison with everybody else. But all of a sudden, I saw the light at the end of the tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
And got a couple other medications along the way over a 30-year stretch. And finally, it made the cocktail that worked. And I would say 80% of my old symptoms are gone now. And I'm doing really well.
Mm. That's good. It's good to hear that. Now, you mentioned you having issues with your father. And did you have other siblings? And how was it dealing? If so, how was it? How
I
has it?
have, I have a brother and sister.
Okay.
They were not aware of what I was going through
Mm-hmm.
until I went into the hospital. They had no idea. Uh, my father I would imagine he just thought I was lazy and didn't want to do anything and wanted him to support me. Nothing was further from the truth. And in reality, my father really didn't pay much attention to me, even though I worked with him all day, every day. We didn't have any kind of relationship at all. And then
Okay.
in the end, it all blew up in a confrontation in 78 or 72.
Mm-hmm.
My mother, on the other hand, had really abnormal problems with her face for 15 years. So she was in agony and really she she was okay, but when this problem with the face, this big terrible pain came up, she was incapacitated. So she had more on her plate than she could take me under consideration. She did, but a lot of time was spent with herself.
Hmm. Now, challenges, issues, but then I believe that along the way, you had some helping hands. There are people who were supporting you, who've seen you through the journey. Who are they?
The way I got through it in high school was because I had a lot of close friends, and not my family, but my friends helped
Mm-hmm.
me the most. Um, and the other thing is, my psychiatrist back then, psychiatrists were also the therapist.
Mm-hmm.
So today, if you go to a psychiatrist, you see him for 10 or 15 minutes. They ask you how you're doing and think about making drug changes. Back then, the psychiatrist did the whole thing. So my psychiatrist and I got pretty close. And if it weren't for him, I doubt if I would have made it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but really, what I did by hiding it only hurt myself. That is not what you should do. You should be
Mm,
open, tell friends what you're going through, because you really need a support group if you're going to get through the horrible symptoms of bipolar. Um, Most people don't know that bipolar does not affect just the mind, that some of the symptoms you can have from bipolar are terrible aches and pains, terrible flu, uh, lots of stuff. So
mm,
not only do you have to mess around trying to figure out how to get your thinking under control, you got to get all this other stuff taken care of.
mm. Okay, okay. Now, I happen to come across a book with your name.
Yes, that's mine.
Tell us about it. Teetering on a tightrope.
Yes. Here's how that book came about. Um, about 4 or 5 years ago, I still had some major issues that I wanted to close, and they've been bugging me all my life. Didn't constitute bad bipolar or depression, but just really bothered me. And kind of like thinking, what if, what if? And so I went to a trauma therapist here in Scottsdale, and what she did was she said, let's go through your entire life from the beginning to now. And we did. Everything had happened, and there were serious things happening all the time, different periods. When we got done, uh, she said, you ought to write a book about this. Now, I'd never considered writing a book, but I decided to go online and look up all the bipolar books that were already published, and there's a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I noticed was that nobody did exactly what she was telling me to do, and that is talk about your life chronologically from start to finish. And that's what I did. And it's been published, it is out there, it's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And I've had a good reception from it it's only been out for 2 weeks, I think, 2 or 3 weeks.
Mm,
So it describes my life at times graphically. Uh, Other times I talk about how I recovered, uh, what I do now, which is spending a lot of my time facilitating a couple support groups out here. And then I talk a lot about persistence, following your doctor's orders is the most important thing that you can do. Um, you may or may not have a support system. You're better off if you do, but you can still beat this thing and have a good life. Now, bipolar is not curable, and it takes a strong will to get through it. There's plenty of medications available, but here's the problem: only about 50% of those who take medicines for depression or mental health get any help. The other 50%, if they pursue it long enough, uh, they can have a good life. For those who can't get help from medication, and now there's a lot of them to try, and don't ever give up until you've exhausted your supply of medications. But there are a lot of treatments that people who are not responding to drugs, and also people who are doing okay on the drugs, There's cognitive behavioral treatment. There's dialectic uh, behavioral treatment. There's intensive outpatient therapy, and there's a whole list of them. And there's also shock therapy. There's uh, some medications um, that are very, very expensive. I'm trying to think of, can't think of the one I'm really thinking about, but it's very expensive. Uh, but it works pretty well for anyone who is willing to go that route and can take the medication. Can't think of the name of it right now, but it'll come to me in a little while.
Okay.
Um, Go ahead.
Yeah, you remember it. So you talked
Oh, I
about,
did remember it. It's ketamine.
okay. Oh, someone will hear that and could note it. Um, you did talk about support groups.
Mhm.
This is what I'm thinking because I know we have support groups that have individuals who have been going through the same thing and come together, like the Alcoholic Anonymous and such kind of groups. Is this the same kind of group that you come together as bipolar, or what kind of support group is it?
Well, the groups I run are all types of mental health issues. Um, Predominantly, that means bipolar and depression, but we have some people with schizophrenia, uh, anxiety, a whole host of different problems. And the way I run the groups is I usually have between 15 and 20 people in a group for 2 hours a session.
Okay.
We just start with whoever I pick, and just in random order, they're all given a chance to talk about what they're going through. Very rarely does someone say, "Oh no, I don't want to talk." Uh, this is one of the it seems for so many people, groups are great because you're in with people who know what you're going through. Now, they didn't go through the exact same thing, but they have some of the exact feelings and thoughts and stuff like that. So these people get to talk for 10, 15 minutes. And then people from the group will ask questions. I will ask questions, and it flows pretty well. Uh, the best number of participants to have is between 12 and 15. The sessions go 2 hours, and if you get beyond 15 people, you have to either cut somebody off, which is bad, or go longer. So, but those support groups can have a big impact on someone's lives. And I'll tell you, a lot of the people who come to my groups don't have any other way to get therapy. Now, I get this question every once in a while. Well, why don't they find a therapist? Well, simple. It's so damn expensive that a lot of people can't afford it, and insurance is covering less and less all the time.
Hmm.
Plus, if you try to pay out of pocket, the price of going to a therapist or psychiatrist has gone through the roof. And there's a lot of people who just can't afford it. There are also a lot of people who think, well, this is the way I'm going to live my life. There's nothing I can do about it, but just roll on. And they feel miserable and have a miserable life.
Hmm.
There are also those people who get excited about getting medication. They get their medication. And if it doesn't work in the first couple weeks, they get upset. They cut off the medication. which really the effects of most medication takes a month or more. And so they stop taking the medication and go back to the way they were before, and nothing is accomplished. And then there are those people who just say, I'm afraid of medication and I'm not going to take it. So you put all that together, and they're the reasons why a lot of people never get treatment or they quit the treatment.
Hmm. Wow, that's very well put. And then thank you for that clarity that you've given us. Uh, we actually have one of our viewers who's known as Angela. Thank you, Angela, for coming to our show. And she appreciates this information that you have given us. Steve, we appreciate you.
Can she hear me or does she
Yes,
know?
she's hearing you. She's hearing
Can I
you.
ask her a question?
Yeah, ask her a question. I hope she's still here. And then she can hear you. Ask her a question.
Angela, how are you? Um, how old are you and how long have you been suffering?
If she's been suffering, I'm not so sure that she's been.
I'm
She'll
here.
tell us.
Great
She'll tell
info.
us. Or if she's dealing with such kind of people. She says she's great. She's here.
Oh, I
Okay.
see. On my screen it says Greta.
Yeah, great. I fixed it for her because I think she's typing.
Well, I hope that she gets some good out of what I'm saying because it's all true, and that you have to be the one to make it work. You can't rely on anyone to always pick you up when you fall down. You've got to do the job of making your life a whole hell of a lot better. And it
Hmm.
can be.
Now the thing is that even if she's not the one, or if the listener is not the one who's listening, we all have contact with friends. We have family that could be going through it, and this information is very helpful. So she responded, and she says that she's a psychologist, and yes, what you are saying is very correct.
Good. Because it's all what I've been through and what I've discovered in my life. One of the things I want to say that is very disturbing to me is, along with the expense of seeing a psychologist or psychiatrist, the number of those kind of doctors is dwindling. Insurance, which seems to be their pattern, has made it harder and harder for psychiatrists and psychologists to make a good living. And it's going to get really dicey in the next few years if the rate of those people dropping out of the profession, then we're going to have some real problems.
Hmm. Okay, it's good to have that information. Now, going back to what you have documented in your book and connecting you with the situation. Now, I'm thinking, and maybe someone who's listening or watching is asking himself, who doesn't have a clue about bipolar, considering that bipolar affects the mind, how are you able to recall all the events? Do you also remember the worst of them, where when you were cursing people and doing every kind of thing? Do you remember everything?
Yes, it made it very easy for me to write the book because I just outlined what the chapters were going to be. I knew them in order. I knew past people's names. I mean, you got to realize when you go through something like bipolar, um, everything is magnified so much about how bad you feel. At least this is the way it worked with me, that I could remember everything. Now, you asked me what I had for breakfast this morning. I have no clue, but I've been able to. It, I tell you what, it took longer to get the book published than it took for me to write it. Publishing is a tough game, and there's a lot of hurdles with it, and can be pretty expensive.
Uh, yeah.
When you
Mhm.
read the book, and I go into details of when I was assaulted, you'll get more clarity about what the mind can do to get you through a terrible episode like that. So that means everybody's got to pick up the book.
Yeah. Remember to take the book. Yeah. By Steve, Teetering on a Tightrope. My Bipolar Journey by Steve W. Wilson. Go get it. The link is in the description of the video or on the audio, wherever it is that you're tuned to this episode. Go get the book. Yeah. And and
And you know
and
what? The book is short. It's only 120 pages long, and most people couldn't read it in a couple to 3 hours. So
Mhm.
I kept it concise and hit the important parts, and I think it's a good read, fast read.
Okay, that's good. Now, that's about it. Thank you very much, Steve, for sharing everything that you've shared with us. We appreciate your time.
Glad to.
Yes. Anything that you like to say before we go?
Well, the biggest thing and the biggest reason I wrote this book was to share that I got through it, took a long time, did everything the doctor said. A whole bunch of stuff went on that we haven't talked about today, but you just gotta keep going. Don't give up. Um, I think that one of the toughest things I did was keeping it quiet from everybody. They didn't know. Um, and I don't know the answer whether if it started all over again today, whether I would tell many people. Um, so many people don't understand about mental health issues that may be detrimental to you, but you have to decide that on your own.
Okay. If you feel that you're going through it, don't keep quiet. Tell someone out there. Visit a psychologist. Visit any person that could be having more knowledge than you have and get some help. So says Steve Wilson. Thank you very much. We appreciate. So that's about it. We thank you very much for taking your time, and we wish you continued health and continued clear mind as you have right here. And yeah, that's about it. I remind all the viewers to go and get the book, or the listeners. Yes, thank you very much, Angela, and everybody else who's heard us, or those who have listened to the recorded version of this episode. We thank you for taking your time, and please pass this information to everybody out there. It's going to help someone. You could be that person whom is being waited upon to pass this message. Steve has told us, he shared everything that he could, and so it's your time to share more. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to thank you for having me on the show. Anybody who wants to get in touch with me, my website is not up yet because the book's only been out a couple weeks. But you can get in touch with Anthony, and he'll give you my email address. I don't accept phone calls, and if you want, call me and ask me what you're going to do. I am not a therapist. I can't tell you one thing about how to treat you. Everybody is different, but I can tell you what worked for me and what didn't also work for me.
That's good. And thank you very much for that invite, Steve. We appreciate. So why don't we just share your email right here? The email of Steve
Oh, it's
is,
on the screen. Okay.
yeah, swwilson.wilson@gmail.com. Go ahead and connect with Steve.
I'd love to hear from you. And
Yeah.
Anthony, thanks a lot. I've enjoyed this.
Yeah, thank you too for taking your time to come here and tell us everything that you've told us, and we appreciate and we are happy
When
that you
will,
have enjoyed.
when will this go live?
It is already live. That's why we are hearing people respond. But
When can I get it? That's what.
yeah, you're gonna get it immediately as soon as we are here.
Oh,
We are
that's cool.
here.
That's
Yes,
good.
yes. So you can start sharing.
Okay.
Okay. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Steve. And that's about it. At Now Tell Us, I've been your host, Anthony Morore, and together with our guest today, Steve Wilson, we're saying bye for now.
Bye. Thanks,
Bye.
guys.
Yeah, thanks.
See ya.
Yeah, see you. Oh, we are stuck. They don't want